Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and in this case talking about yet another very common topic, which is barter items or hedge against inflation. These two things are not the same, and it is important to understand the difference. Now, it's one of those topics where everyone has his or her opinion, and that's just perfectly fine. Now, is that accurate? Is that a reflection of reality? Does this end up happening when things really unravel and you have a full-blown economic collapse, when you have a social and political and economic breakdown of a country? Usually no. Many of the things that people assume will be extremely valuable are not really it's not really the case. There's some things that have certain value in specific circumstances, while in others it is completely useless. So if you're looking, for example, at the value of cigarettes and booze, you know, typical thing that you hear, yes, in prison they are super valuable. In wars, yes, these are the kind of things that people look after and will barter for, and they want to get their hands on the stuff. Yes, of course. If there's a serious, large-scale crisis and this extends itself over time, is it true that certain liquors or certain alcohol beverages would be, you know, of high barter value? Yes, it may well be the case. Is it all the same though? No, it is not the same, the value of a pack of cigarettes in prison than in Venezuela, where people are really struggling for food, or even more so for actual money, right? It is the same thing as when people talk about the value of a gun. You know, the value of a gun is so much when things get bad. Yes, in certain situations, in certain cases. Most people, for example, in Venezuela, they would not be able to buy a gun because it's not legal for them. And in spite of what some people are led to believe, most people actually try to follow the law, and it's only criminals that don't care about that. So law-abiding citizens, the kind of people that you probably are in contact with, and you carry yourself among them, those people will not end up buying a gun from you illegally, even if they probably may end up needing it. Does that mean that someone may end up asking for one and paying dearly for it? Of course. The point with guns is it's much better if you get them while you still can, and of course learn to keep your mouth shut about it if things end up unraveling later on. You don't want to be careless about sharing that kind of information. Now, if you're going to be looking at specifically barter items, the one thing I feel very strongly about, it's this, you know, it's food. It's always the same thing during different wars throughout history, even recent ones, even ongoing ones, economic crisis in different countries, different parts of the world. People become desperate for food. There's women in countries like Cuba that will sell their own bodies, sell themselves for literally for a can of meat for their kids, not even for themselves, for their children. So people become very desperate and are pretty much willing to do absolutely anything if pushed to that limit. And that limit is going to be food. Water is crucial, but water, it is plentiful enough that there's a possibility of getting some. It's not untrue that there's parts of the world where, yes, scarcity of water is a big problem. It's nowhere near as difficult or as complicated as scarcity of food. Scarcity of water, somehow you can figure out. You know, people struggle with that, even die of thirst. But it's really not the most common thing. Now, people starving to death, that happens all day long. So food is key, and food is something that you're going to be using yourself. So even if you're not bartering with it, you're still using it. A can like this, which lasts for several years without a problem, even beyond the expiration date, you can eat it yourself. You can barter with it with someone else. You will be able to exchange this, a can of tuna, a can of Spam, even a can of, soup is good, but protein, meat, is usually where it's at in terms of how valuable it is for the average people. When there's usually these efforts to keep communities alive, afloat with emergency supplies of food, there's usually going to be rice, pasta, the more cheap, the more affordable stuff that ends up being spread in that community. The more precious item is meat. It's protein. That's where you have something of great value. In Venezuela, as of right now, a can of tuna is like $1 or $2, which is the average wage in this country is about $2 or $3 per month. So a can of tuna is literally the labor of a person for maybe 10 days. Imagine how valuable that is. You're going back into times of the Roman Empire, where people would work for maybe one of these coins for this amount of silver. And this brings me a good segue to the value of precious metals. Even in places like Venezuela, where people are desperate for food, this is still extremely valuable as well. People dive into literally gutters so as to find even small pieces of gold, silver. Any of this will have a very high value. Now, if you have to sell this, well, it's about how smart you are. If you're just selling it in your average retail store downtown, probably you're going to be getting hit pretty bad, maybe 50% spot. If you move around and you find your own client for it, maybe you get closer to the spot value of the metal. But even at 50%, imagine how much food that buys you in situations like this, where a can of tuna is almost like 10 days of labor for the average person. Now, this is in terms of hardcore barter items, like when you're talking about a full-blown meltdown of society and people are just bartering to stay alive. Food is going to be paramount. Food is going to be extremely precious. The idea of, yes, we're going to be bartering with ammunition like in some of the books, that is really not the case. It really just doesn't work that way, because in the different crises that we've seen, it simply hasn't worked that way. So we don't have to invent something that we cannot actually see and verify with actual facts. We have plenty of those. It's just a matter of not being lazy and doing your research and learning from that, which is what I do. And in my research, people don't go about, yeah, I have 2 bullets of 9mm. How much is it? Oh, yes, you can get a neg with that. No. And you know why not? Because if you have a gun, there's a good chance that some ammunition you have. And there's a good chance that if you have the papers and permit or whatever it is that you need to legally own a gun, then yes, you have the permit or whatever is necessary to buy the ammunition to go along with it. And if you don't have that and you're dealing with criminal elements, you shouldn't be even dealing with them in the first place. And besides, there's a huge problem with ammunition, which is you don't know if it works. And if ammo does not go boom when you pull the trigger, that is a death sentence. That is something I personally would not mess with. I have no use for a handful of God knows where the hell those came from, couple of rounds of whatever. I'm not going to be putting that in my gun for what? For hunting in the wild? No, this is used for self-defense. This is used for when your life is in the line, when you're literally about to die. You will not risk your life. I hope you're not that stupid, risking your life with ammunition that may be reloaded with dirt on the inside because the guy did not have powder, which since we're talking about this, is probably the hardest thing to get. I can easily flatten a little bit of a primer or get something that's not all that good, or even just improvise a fake primer and just put it in there, and a tip, a projectile, and there's nothing inside, because gunpowder is usually the one that is most restricted and controlled. And I have, 10 rounds of 9mm for bartering. You're going to be taking this and using it to save your life and your family? You're a fool if you do that. So that is where fiction starts, just like with Hollywood movies and people believing that, yeah, it's going to be Mad Max. No, not really like that. We have these events happening already, and we know that's not how it plays out. Now, you have a few cases of ammo. You're dealing with someone that you know, a person you trust. You get some of that ammunition, fine, go with that. I'm telling you though that if you're going to be looking at getting something to barter after the end of the world, this is a lot more reliable, this is a lot easier to move around, and there's going to be a lot more of a market for your item. Same thing for this. These are a little bit more expensive, or maybe a lot more expensive. Energy 5, these last for 20 years. 20 years expiration date in these packs, and it's like 2,000 calories in these, 2,300 calories per pack. That's a lot of food in a little pack that lasts for 20 years. So this would be a premium type of barter item in a situation like that. Do I suggest buying pallets of this? No. I actually suggest buying pallets of pasta, which is the cheapest, and you can store it yourself for a very long time as well. Now, this is not the same in terms of hedge against inflation. That is something else. And what you're seeing right now is people not bartering with food, even though it's getting close to that in certain areas, because people are getting a lot more desperate than the mainstream media is letting you believe. But you're looking at a process by which money is just losing its value. What you want now is something that you put your money on, and that's going to be retaining its value as years go by, as time goes by. And that is where, yes, maybe some of these are good investment. I use Glock is one of the best. Buying a used Glock is like putting your money in a time machine. You're going to be preserving that wealth until the point in which you want to flip that gun. These guns will sell pretty much for the same thing you bought them, maybe even more so. So a used gun, yeah, absolutely. It's not just any crappy gun. Some guns are very much in the market and people want them. So Glocks are always in demand all over the world. I mean, I've been in different places. Usually Glocks, everyone wants to have a Glock. Even people that don't know even a damn about guns will want to have a Glock. Then there's the high-end market, like something like my Manuran MR73, now purchased by Beretta, still being produced. But these are premium, high-quality, expensive guns. These are the kind of guns that go up in value as time goes by. You have people investing, of course, right now in real estate. That's maybe one of the best bets you can have. Of course, not at this moment, and certainly not in certain areas where there's a massive bubble about to burst and you're about to get burned if you go now and pay some ridiculous prices like the ones we're seeing. But one of the things that people did in Argentina, they would buy cars, they would buy apartments, they would buy absolutely anything. Again, keep in mind the bubble that you have specifically right now in some parts, but you just buy anything so as to get rid of that money that is just melting in your pocket or in your bank account. Something like this, yeah, even art. There's people that are buying expensive things. I like weapons, and for example, for me, art would be a World War II K-bar. This for me is something that has a collector's item that has a lot of value. This will retain its value. It has its proper documentation. The soldier who owned this specific knife with its sheet, with its documentation. So this is a legit World War II K-bar. This has a certain value and it's pretty fixed. It's pretty well determined given the condition. Just like with not these coins, these are more of the junk coin, junk type of silver, but I have collector's coins as well. Those, it's all about condition. Condition, if it's 60, it's worth maybe thousands of dollars more than if it's 58, just an example. And that's determined by experts, and you want to buy from reliable sources. But yes, those are also ways in which you preserve, maybe even more so than just junk silver. But junk silver, especially when you're getting started, is one of the safest bets of just paying for whatever the metal is worth. The closer you get to spot, the less likely you are to get burned paying for something that's not. Avoid the numismatic value unless you really know what you're doing, and by that I mean really know. I mean, you have a little bit of an obsession with collecting Morgan dollars, for example, and you know the series, and you know the rare ones and the different markings, and why would a broken mold be worth more than a undamaged coin, and that kind, and the condition. It's always about condition. That's the kind of thing that you don't want to mess with unless you know what you're doing. For example, this coin, you may think, oh, whatever year this is, that's a super valuable year. Yes, it's a super valuable year, giving the condition. If it's in perfect condition, 50, no, not 50, like 69, 60, 59, 60, yes, that's a coin that may be worth thousands of dollars. That same coin in very good condition, literally that technical description, may be worth just a couple hundred, because condition determines the value of the coin rather than a specific, yes, there's very rare years and so on, but condition is where it's at. So you want to look at the difference between saving your money from inflation, which is different from investing. Investing is something that generates money for you. If you have an apartment and you're renting it, yes, that's an investment. If you have some kind of capital that is making money for you in a certain investment, a financial fund, whatever it is, yes, investments make money. If it's just sitting there, it's just a way in which you're preserving that wealth and protecting it specifically from inflation. And maybe you're making a bet. You're betting that it will go up in price later on, or at the very least conserving it. But these are all different things, and sometimes people get these confused. Barter item with inflation, with protection from inflation, with an investment, all the different things, and it's important to understand the difference. Guys, I hope I gave you a little bit of an idea. In my experience, the thing that has always been good for me has been guns. I know guns, and you know what? Whenever I had to sell guns for whatever reason, I always either got back the money, or very close to that, or even made more out of it. And the more I know about them, the more likely that's what happens if I end up flipping or selling one, because I know this well. This is something that I like, and I understand it. So stick to what you know, and if you don't know enough, do more research. Learn before putting important amounts of money into it. Guys, it's going to be all for now. See you in our next video. Take care.